Good day. We are Group 3, and today we are going to talk about the regulatory agency. Okay, so let's start. So, usually, di ba, when it comes to politics or to government talks, di ba, we always hear about the three branches of it. So, that includes the legislative branch, the executive branch, and of course, the judicial branch. Kung saan, syempre, may kanya-kanya silang functions. But, have you actually heard about the regulatory agency? Kasi, yun yung pag-uusapan natin eh. No? So, ano nga ba yung regulatory agency? No? So, before anything else, i-analyze muna natin yung two words. Okay. Kapag kasi sinabi nating regulatory agency, of course, from the word itself, which is regulatory, di ba, it means to control, to maintain, to regulate, or, to fix something sa pamamagitan ng batas. No? And then, kapag sinabi naman nating agency, on the other hand, it's more of organization, samahan, or grupo. So, technically, the concept of the regulatory agency is samahan ng mga taong gumagawa ng rules, no? Which we call these rules as regulations. Okay. So, usually, those people under those agencies were creating regulations para saan? To maintain peace, to fix certain issues, and, to promote orderliness. And so, since we're talking about the legislatives and the branches, no, hindi niyo ba napansin na yung trabaho ng regulatory agency is just same with the function of a legislative branch, no? So, the question here is, does it mean ba na isa lang sila? Well, basically, hindi. Pero, they do the same function, no? Kasi, si regulatory agency kasi, although it was not originally a part of the Constitution, naging part naman siya ng government. So, meaning, independent government sila. Now, the reason why they exist is because it is the legislative branch who created them. Okay? So, that is the reason kung bakit they have the same function, no? Which is what? Which is to implement and to enforce laws. Okay? Pero syempre, regulatory agencies will not be created if wala siyang function or purpose to the legislative branch. Okay? Kaya dito, papasok yung tanong na, ano ba yung pinagkaiba ng legislative branch sa regulatory agency, no? So, ganito kasi yan. Sa legislative branch kasi, di ba, sabi, they are the ones who create laws. Okay? Kumbaga, batas mismo yung ginagawa ng mga nasa legislative branch, no? Pero, yung mga nasa regulatory agencies kasi, what they are creating are not laws, kundi regulations. So, magkaiba yung laws sa regulation, no? Magkaiba yan. Now, so these regulations, ang tanging gumagawa lang ng regulations is yung mga nasa agencies. Okay? Now, they are doing it to implement the laws na ipinapasa ng mga legislative branch. So, therefore, magkatulong silang dalawa. So, they have the connections. Okay? Another thing about this is that, kapag sa legislative kasi, yung batas na ginagawa nila is nanggagaling sa ipinapasa ng ng legislative body. So, that includes the Congress and of course the elected officials, no? Pero again, sa regulatory agencies kasi, since independent government sila, meaning sila mismo yung gumagawa or nagka-create ng standards in different fields na in-embody nila. So, like for example, does this agency concerning to education ba? To health? To medicines? Because if so, ano yung mga ini-implement nila? What would be their rules? What would be the rules to prioritize people? What would be their regulation to help and para mag-benefit yung mga tao? Okay? So, once they create those regulations, they will enforce it. So, lastly, in regulatory agency kasi, di ba sa legislative, what they are accepting is from the legislative body or from the elected officials. Sa regulatory agency, they are adopting the orders from the executive head or from the private people. Bakit? Kasi, regulatory agencies were also a part of the executive branch. But of course, they'll be accepting, they will be adopting those orders from the executives if alam nila that it will be beneficial to the people. Kasi every regulatory agency, they have different goals. And one of it was, they have to attain their missions to cover the issues of the industries or of the different industries. Now, the question is, ano ba yung mga industries na nagawa na ng regulatory agencies, no? So, syempre, marami. We do have regulatory agency in the industry of business, in environmental protection, in food, in medicines, in drugs, and even in occupational. Okay? So, for us to have an idea kung paano ba nag-emerge yung mga agencies na to, let's get to know why the industry of occupational had its own regulatory agency. Okay? So, yung reason kung bakit nag-exist yung occupational regulation is because nag-worry yung mga experts. And because they were worried, they have to come up with a mission na, I think we should do this. Since, para naman to sa kapakanan ng mga tao eh. No, that we have to protect people or the public sa harms, sa threats caused by what? Caused by the incompetent, caused by the charlatans. No? So, when we see charlatans, meaning ito yung mga mandurugas, nasasabihin na expert sila, graduate sila sa ganito, ganyan. Pero, all of it was just lies. No? So, in short, mapagpanggap lang sila. And, nagpapanggap sila in order to fool people. Okay? So, in short, they were pretending to be someone else. No? And, of course, that is a threat. Kaya, yung mga regulations na ginawa sa industry of the occupational, yun ay para lamang magkaroon ng restriction para sa mga professions. So, therefore, in occupational regulations, pinapahalagahan nila yung mga professionals to be assessed.
Next po is yung regulatory agencies dito sa ating bansa. I have here 10 examples of regulatory agencies here in the Philippines. First is the Department of Science and Technology, also known as DOST. So, sabi dito na DOST is the provider of world-class scientific, technological, and innovative solutions that will lead to a higher productivity and better quality of life. DOST po is responsible and shall take a lead sa coordination ng mga proyektong may kaugnayan sa science and technology sa ating bansa at may tungkuling ding magsagawa ng mga rules and regulations sa larangan ng agam at teknolohiya bilang pagtataguyod ng kaunlarang pambansa. Second is the Department of Agriculture, which is the government agency naman na responsible for the promotion of agricultural development by providing the policy framework, public investments, and support services na kailangan for domestic and export-oriented business enterprises. Yung Department of Agriculture is yung executive department ng Philippine government na nagpo-promote ng agricultural and fisheries development and growth. So, as a government, ito din po ay naatasan or is responsible na i-ensure yung food safety and contribute to poverty alleviation. Yung Department of Agriculture din is shall take a lead in addressing biosafety issues related to the country's agricultural productivity and food security. Yung third po is the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, also known as DENR. So, yung DENR is the primary government that is responsible for the conservation, management, development, and proper use of the country's environmental and natural resources. So, pag sinabi natin na natural resources, it includes those in the reservations, watershed areas, and land of the public domains, as well as the licensing and regulation of natural resources utilizations. So, yung DNR DENR is also expected na mag-lead in evaluating and monitoring regulated articles intended for bioremediation, the improvement of forest genetic resources, and wildlife genetic resources. So, yung part naman is the Department of Health. Well, alam naman po natin na yung Department of Health or DOH ay responsible on our nation's health issues. So, yung major mandate naman ng DOH is to provide national policy, direction, and develop national plans, technical standards, and guidelines on health. DOH is responsible also for ensuring access to basic public health services para sa lahat ng mga Pilipino through the provision of quality healthcare and regulations of providers of health goods and services. So, PIP is the Department of Education or DepEd. So, the Department of Education, also called as Kagawaran ng Edukasyon, is the executive department of the Philippine government na responsible for ensuring access to, promoting equity in, and improving the quality of basic education. So, yung DepEd po is the main agency that is tasked to manage and govern the Philippine system of basic education. Yung DepEd din is the chief formulator ng Philippine education policy and responsible for the Philippine primary and secondary school system. Pang-anim naman po is the Department of Labor or DOLE. So, yung the Department of Labor and Employment is one of the executive departments ng Philippine government that is mandated to formulate policies, implement programs, and services. The DOLE also promotes gainful employment opportunities and optimizes the development and utilization of the country's manpower resources. So, yung pang-pito is the Department of Trade and Industry or DTI. Yung DTI ay one of the departments in the Philippines na tasked as the main economic catalyst that enables innovative, competitive, job-generating, inclusive business and empowers consumers. Yung DTI is the prime mover of consumer welfare. So, yung consumer welfare is the policy on the protection of consumers and establishes the standards of conduct for business and industry in the country. It is committed to protecting the rights and interests of the consumer. Yung pangwalo is yung Department of Foreign Affairs. Yung DFA is the executive department of the Philippine government tasked to contribute to the enhancement of the national security and the protection of the territorial integrity and national sovereignty. In simpler terms, yung DFA po yung may tungkulin na mamahala sa pagpapabuti ng ugnay ng Pilipinas sa iba't ibang bansa. Yung DFA din is yung nangangasiwa sa mga gawain ng ating mga ambassador sa iba't ibang bansa at sa mga pandaigdigang samahan. DFA din yung in charge sa pangangalaga sa kapakanan ng mga mamamayan ng Pilipinas sa ibang bansa. Next naman is yung OSLO. OSLO is yung Republic Act 11058. So, yung OSLO provides that each Filipino worker is protected against injury, sickness, or death through safe and healthful working conditions, and that employers must promote strict but dynamic, inclusive, and gender-sensitive measures in the formulation and implementation of policies and programs related to occupational safety and health. Yung OSLO din is applies to the establishment, project, sites, including the PISA or Philippine Economic Zone Authority establishments, and all other workplaces. Exposure to safety and health hazards is the basic for having high-risk establishment, medium-risk establishment, and low-risk establishments. And last is the Department of Tourism or DOT. So, in Department of Tourism shall be the primary government agency charged with the responsibility to encourage, promote, and develop tourism as a major socio-economic activity, to generate foreign currency and employment, and to spread benefits of tourism to both private and public sector.
Process of rulemaking in regulatory agency. Rulemaking process. Before the proposed rule, before the final rule, the final rule. Before the proposed rule, consider initiating events, laws enacted by Congress, court decisions, agency initiatives from various sources including agency plans and priorities, new data technologies or research, patterns of accidents or violations, public comments on RFIs, retrospective analysis of existing regulations, recommendations from the President, OMB, or Office of the Management and Budget, other agencies, congressional committees, federal advisory committees, states, or external groups. Changes in the regulated community, petitions for rulemaking, including petitions for reconsiderations. Dito sa before the proposed rule, iisipin mo muna yung rule na gagawin mo. Kung saan pwede siyang sa may mga napasa na sa Congress na mga batas, or pwede rin yung nirecommend ng presidente or mga iba't ibang ahensya na kung ano yung batas na makakatulong para maganda yung regulation. The proposed rule. Develop a proposed rule and notice of proposed rulemaking process to add, revise, remove, or redesignate Code of Federal Regulation provisions, and it must consist of description or statement of the proposed regulatory text and preamble to inform a non-expert reader of the proposal, legal basis, and purpose. The notice of proposed rulemaking must explain legal basis, the statutory authority to issue rules for regulated entities in the subject area, proposed provisions, a presentation of the proposed rule or text, a description of the issues, rationale for each proposed provision, an explanation of why rule is needed. Kung bakit nga ba kailangan natin yung rule na ipopropose mo. What it would accomplish and what data, research, analysis, and assumptions were used to develop the rule. Rule preamble should discuss regulatory background and history, alternatives the agency is considering, analysis describing compliance with applicable statutes or executive orders. Dito sa the proposed rule, gagawa kayo ng parang letter. Ito nga yung notice of proposed rulemaking process sa Code of Federal Regulation. Nakasulat doon yung background history, tapos yung kung bakit ba siya, yung purpose niya, tapos ano yung mga ginamit na mga research kung paano na-develop tong rule na to. Sa next is before the final rule. Analyze the public comments. An agency must give the public a meaningful opportunity to submit written comments in paper or electronic form, and it must consider all relevant matter presented. At the end of the process, the agency must base its reasoning and conclusions on the rulemaking record consisting of the comments, scientific data, expert opinions, and facts accumulated during the pre-rule and proposed rule stages. Dito naman is yung kasi dito sa may sa may na proposed rule, magbibigay rin sila ng mga comment sa may mga newspaper. Ipopost nila yan kasama yan sa may notice of proposed rulemaking para sa mga tao. That doon pwede silang mag-comment kung ano yung especially yung mga dapat talagang matatamaan nung rulemaking, yung proposed rule. Katulad nung kunwari sa business, yung mga businessman yung mga magko-comment or opinions kung nakakabuti ba o masasagasaan yung mga magko-comment or opinions kung nakakabuti ba o masasagasaan sila nung yung business nila ng yung rulemaking, yung proposed rule na yun. Kasi yung comment din ng mga tao is mahalaga para tulad dito is next is the final rule. When an agency publishes a final rule, generally the rule is effective no less than 30 days after the date of publication in the Federal Register. If the agency wants to make the rule effective sooner, it must be cite good cause. And as to why this is in public interest, a final will represent the Code of Federal Regulation provision adopted and must incorporate into the preamble a concise general statement of basis and purpose for the agency decisions. Final rule choices must not be arbitrary or capricious. Sa final rule, dito na yung pinag-uusapan kung kailan siya magiging effective. Tapos, dito na rin may lalagay yung isa may coding of federal regulations. Sa CFR o Code of Federal Register, doon nakalagay yung mga batas or rules ng mga agency. Example of punishment to violators of regulatory agency. Punishment to ERC regulations or Energy Regulation Commissions. For example, is operating a generation company facility without a valid certificate of compliance and appropriate clearances. Failure to provide open and non-discriminatory access to the transmission and distributory system as and when prescribed required. Non-compliance with the prescribed technical specifications and performance standards. Non-submissions of a plan comply with technical specification prescribed by the grid or distribution codes and failure to implement said plan within 3 years from effectivity of the said codes. Operating as an electricity supplier without a valid license or permit. Failure to file an application for unbundling of rates. Operating as transmission or distribution utility without a valid certificate of public convenience and necessity. Failure to file duly negotiated transition supply contracts within the time prescribed by law. Failure to implement the mandated rate reduction. Failure to distribution utility to adopt and implement lifeline rate. Sa bawat paglabag sa mga codes na ito ng ERC is a fine of 100,000 pesos plus 100 pesos a day for every day of violation shall be imposed upon any person who has been found to have committed a violation of any of the provisions of the Act and its implementing. Next. Punishment to PDEA. Any authorized person mentions in Section 43 of the regulations who failed to provide safekeeping of dangerous drugs and controlled chemicals under his custody, resulting in either loss or death of any quantity of the dangerous drugs and controlled chemicals, shall be imposed of the following sanctions. First offense, fine of 10,000 with a stern warning that repetition of the same offense shall be dealt with in accordance with Section 32, Article 2 of RA 9165 and other applicable penal laws. Sanction liability to a person violating any regulation issued by the board. The penalty of imprisonment imprisonment ranging from 6 months and 1 day to 4 years and fine ranging from 10,000 pesos, 20,000 to 50,000 pesos shall be imposed upon any person found violating any regulation duly issued by the board pursuant to this act, in addition to the administrative sanction imposed by the board.
Sources of compliance assistance of regulatory agencies. The Compliance Assistance Program provides businesses, federal facilities, local government, and tribes with tools to help meet environmental regulatory requirements. Compliance assistance tools and methods include one-to-one counseling, online resources centers, fact sheets, guides, and training. Compliance assistance simply describe the activities, tools, or technical assistance which provide clear and consistent information for regulated establishment and to help them understand the applicable environmental regulations and to be able to comply with their obligations under those regulations. Small businesses compliance promotes environmental compliance among small businesses by providing incentives to discover and correct environmental problems. It will eliminate or significantly reduce penalties for small businesses that voluntarily discover violations of environmental law and corporate disclosure. Making a voluntary disclosure under small businesses compliance is an entity has 21 days from the time and it discovers that a violation has or may have occurred to disclose the violation in writing to EPA. Discovery is when any officer, director, employee, and agent of the facility has an objectively reasonable basis for believing that a violation has or may have occurred. Small businesses resources information sheets, training, checklists, compliance guides, mentoring programs, and other activities, which also provides potential penalty reduction for voluntary disclosure and correction of environmental violation. Businesses can find more information through serve as a conduct for small businesses to access EPA and facilitates communications between the small businesses community and the agency. The office reviews and resolve disputes with EPA and work with EPA personnel to increase their understanding of small businesses in the development and enforcement of environmental regulation. Compliance assistance centers address real-world issues in plain language through websites, telephone, assistance lines, fact bank system, and email discussion groups. And the centers help businesses, local governments, and federal facilities under federal environmental requirements and save money through pollution prevention techniques. The sources of compliance assistance in different industries. Emergency response. Information to help the regulated community better understand the regulations and to prepare for, and respond to environmental emergencies. Pollution prevention resources exchange. It is the resources to help business advance pollution prevention practices, means taking action to reduce the use of toxics and other potentially harmful materials at the beginning of the process or operation. For example, is the substitution of less hazardous, less toxic cleaning agents. Financing for environmental compliance. New technologies and asset management techniques may help local governments create a plan to finance major capital assets, ensure compliance with environmental status and regulations, and minimize health and environmental risks. Here's the step financial planning process that can help your community determine capital asset, technical, and financial needs and find available air, waste, and water resources to meet your compliance goals. Step 1. Assemble a team. A good team is essential to the overall success of the project. Team members must determine the equipment needs, complete a cost analysis, development develop a financing plan, help the community understand how the capital asset improvements will benefit the entire community. 2. Conduct a needs analysis. An inventory of current system cost, future capital asset needs, and associated cost is critical to the creation of a credible financing plan. Without reasonable accurate data, the financing plan is useless. Step 3. Define the project goals. The team should also monitor community events and resources. The project goals may need to be adjusted to respond to unforeseen circumstances, population changes, or demographic shift. A community feedback mechanism may provide new information to improve the project. Step 4. Devise a technical solution. Defining a technical problem and devising a long-term solution can make or break an environmental capital asset project. The underlying problem must be resolved at the end of the construction project to avoid wasting valuable time and financial resources. Project planning can help avoid cost overruns and adequately identifying the resolve any underlying problem. Cities, countries, and tribes can hire a private contractor to help to define the ultimate solution. Step 5. Conduct a The cost to provide service changes over time. A rate analysis should be conducted periodically to ensure the rates cover the full cost of providing a service. The rate analysis should determine whether the current rate structure is covering current costs and whether the rate will need to be changed to meet future costs. Step 6. Complete a community-wide financial analysis. So, once the team has determined the capital asset requirements and calculate the corresponding cost of the project, the information should be analyzed in relation to the community's overall projects and financial commitments. Step 7. Select financial options. There are 4 main financing options. These are the Municipal Revenue Generating Authority. Its communities can generate revenue through the assessment of taxes, fees, special charges, and fines. Grants. These are transfer of money to a specific legal entity that does not need to be repaid. Loans is the temporary transfer of a specific amount of money that must be repaid in a set amount time, typically with a specified interest rate. Bonds. It is a written promise to repay borrowed money on a definite schedule and usually at a fixed rate of interest for the life of the bond. Step 8. Create and communicate the financing plan. By completing the prior steps, all the information necessary to create a project financing plan has been collected. A written financing plan will help team members define the project goals, allow the various tasks to be monitored during the course of the project, and help the team members communicate the plan and obtain buy-in from all project stakeholders. Lead policy and guidance. It is the resources to help you comply with regulations regarding lead in paint, water, air, and waste. Renovation, repair, and painting program. It is the compliance information for firms performing renovation, repair, and painting projects that disturb lead-based paint in homes, childcare facilities, and preschool built before 1978. Pesticides. Pesticides Registration Manual is a resource for companies and individuals who want to have their pesticides product registered for sale in the United States. Sector-based. It is easy to understand compliance information target to the following sector and environmental topics: agriculture, automotive service and repair automotive recycling, chemical manufacturers, colleges and universities, construction, federal facilities, food processing, healthcare, local governments, metal finishing, paints and coating printers, ports, transportation, drives, and other environmental issues. Waste. Leak detection and repair. It is a best practices guide. Leaking equipment such as valves, pumps, and connectors are a large source of emission of volatile organic compounds and volatile hazardous air pollutants. The leak detection and repair is intended for use by regulated entities such as petroleum refineries and chemical manufacturing facilities, as well as compliance inspectors. The guide details some of the problems identified with leak detection and repair programs. It focuses on Method 21 requirements and describes the practices that can be used to increase the effectiveness of an LDAR program. Water. EPA sets legal limits on over 90 contaminants in drinking waters. The legal limit for a contaminant reflects the level that protects human health and that water system can achieve using the best available technology. EPA rules also set water testing schedules and methods that water system must follow. The Safe Drinking Water Act, or SDWA, gives individual states the opportunity to set and enforce their own drinking water standards if the standards are at the minimum of as stringent as EPA's national standard.